In the small town of Maplewood, nestled between the rolling hills and dense forests, life was quiet and uneventful. The townsfolk were friendly, and the evenings were often spent sitting on porches, sipping sweet tea while exchanging stories about the day's happenings. But one summer night, everything changed. It started with a flicker. At first, it was just a few shimmering lights dancing in the sky, a sight so unusual that the residents thought nothing of it. It was summer, after all, and the air was thick with warmth and the promise of adventure. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting hues of orange and purple across the sky, the lights began to grow. They twinkled like stars but were far too close to be celestial bodies. The first to notice was old Mr. Jenkins, a retired school teacher known for his wild imagination. He was sitting on his porch, gazing up at the sky with a mix of fascination and concern. "Martha," he called to his wife, who was inside knitting a scarf. "Come look at this." Martha shuffled out, squinting against the fading light. "What is it, dear?" "Look," he pointed, his gnarled finger shaking with excitement. "Those lights. They weren't there before." Martha followed his gaze, and her eyes widened in disbelief. "Well, I'll be. That's odd. They look alive." As the days turned into weeks, the lights became a nightly spectacle, drawing the townspeople outside like moths to a flame. They danced and pulsed, swirling in vibrant colors, blues, greens, and reds, illuminating the dark sky. Yet, with each passing night, a strange tension settled over Maplewood. It began with a whisper. People talked of feeling uneasy whenever they stared at the lights for too long. "You know," said Mrs. Thompson at the diner, her voice barely above a hush, "I heard that if you watch them too long, you might disappear." Everyone laughed, dismissing her as just another superstitious old woman. But the laughter soon faded when Tom Bennett, the town's handyman, vanished one night after watching the lights. He had been standing outside the old library with a few friends, laughing and joking when the lights caught his attention. He stared up, entranced, while the others chatted animatedly among themselves. The next morning, Tom was gone. His friends assumed he'd headed home early, but when he didn't show up for work the next day, concern grew. They searched the town, calling his name, but he was nowhere to be found. Days passed without a sign of Tom, and the townsfolk began to worry. He must have gone on a trip, someone suggested, but deep down, they all feared the truth. A week later, Tom reappeared at the edge of town, looking dazed and confused. "Tom," they shouted, rushing towards him. "Where have you been?" I don't remember," he stammered, eyes darting around as if he didn't recognize anyone. "One moment I was watching the lights, and then, nothing." Panic spread like wildfire. The mayor called an emergency town meeting, gathering everyone in the community hall. "We can't ignore this," she urged, her voice trembling. "We need to stop watching the lights. They're dangerous." But the allure of the lights was strong. Despite the warnings, curiosity and fear coexisted in the hearts of the townsfolk. More disappearances followed, each one more disturbing than the last. First, it was young Ellie, the baker's daughter, who had gone to see the lights with her friends. She vanished for 3 days and returned, pale and hollow-eyed, with no memory of where she'd been. As the weeks rolled on, a pattern began to emerge. Those who returned after disappearing exhibited strange behavior. They wandered the town aimlessly, their eyes dull, as if a part of them had been taken. They no longer smiled or laughed, and when they caught their reflection in the glass of the diner or the store windows, there was nothing. No reflection. Just a blank space where their face should be. "What's happening to them?" whispered Lily, a girl no older than 14, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't know," replied her older brother, Mark, who was trying to stay calm. "But we can't watch the lights anymore. They're not just pretty. There's something else." The nights grew darker as the townsfolk struggled to come to terms with the horrors unfolding around them. It wasn't long before the lights became the subject of gossip, fear, and speculation. The local librarian, Ms. Collins, dug into town records, hoping to find answers. "Listen," she announced one afternoon, her voice low and conspiratorial. "I found something strange. In the records from over a century ago, there were reports of similar lights appearing in the sky. People went missing then too." "What happened to them?" asked a young man, leaning forward eagerly. "They never returned," Ms. Collins said, her voice quivering. "Or they did, but they weren't the same." The stories reached a fever pitch, and the fear became palpable. No one felt safe, and families began to shutter their windows at night, keeping their children indoors. But the pull of the lights was too strong for some. Then came the annual Maplewood Festival, a long-standing tradition celebrating the town's founding. Against the backdrop of the ominous lights, the townsfolk gathered, hoping to reclaim a semblance of normalcy. They filled the streets with laughter, food stalls, and music, all while casting wary glances at the sky. As dusk settled, the festival reached its peak. Children danced under the strings of lights hanging above, and the smell of fried dough wafted through the air. But as the sky darkened, so did the mood. Suddenly, the lights intensified, swirling and flashing in a way they had never done before. It was as if they were alive, pulsating with energy. People began to stare up, entranced, despite their better judgment. "No! Don't look!" Mark shouted, trying to pull his sister away, but it was too late. They were drawn to the spectacle, unable to look away. As the lights whirled above, screams pierced the air. One by one, people began to vanish, absorbed into the glowing vortex. The atmosphere crackled with a strange energy, and the remaining townsfolk, in a panic, scrambled to escape the dreadful scene. The morning after the festival, the town was eerily silent. Houses stood empty, and the streets were bare, littered only with remnants of the previous night's festivities. Families searched for their loved ones, but the town seemed to be losing its soul, one person at a time. When the sun rose, it cast an unsettling glow over Maplewood. Shadows danced in the corners of homes where laughter once resided. And those who had returned from the lights roamed aimlessly, searching for something they couldn't quite grasp. Mark and Lily were among the few left who hadn't been taken or altered by the lights. They huddled in their home, discussing what they had witnessed. "We need to figure out how to stop this," Mark said, determination in his voice. "There must be a way." Lily nodded, her fear palpable. "What if we confront the lights? Maybe there's something we can do." They decided to gather what remained of the townsfolk for one last stand. In the community hall, they laid out their plan. "We'll face the lights together," Mark declared. "If we all look away at the same time, maybe we can break their hold on us." That night, they assembled at the edge of town, hearts pounding with fear and hope. The lights danced above, casting an ethereal glow over the gathering. They whispered amongst themselves, stealing their nerves. "On the count of 3, we look away," Mark instructed. 1, 2, 3. They all turned away, eyes squeezed shut, desperate to resist the call of the lights. But the urge was powerful, clawing at their minds, tempting them to look. Suddenly, a high-pitched wail echoed through the air. The lights flashed violently, illuminating the forest behind them. Panic set in as people began to turn back, one by one, captivated by the display. "No!" Mark shouted, trying to keep everyone focused. But as he looked back, he felt the tug of the lights pulling him in. Lily clutched his arm, tears streaming down her face. "We can't give in." But it was a losing battle. One by one, more townsfolk succumbed to the mesmerizing glow, disappearing into its depths. In a moment of desperation, Mark remembered something Ms. Collins had said about the historical records. What if we can confront the source? Maybe we can break the cycle. With Lily at his side, Mark dashed toward the forest, where the light seemed to pulse more intensely. They pushed through the underbrush, feeling a strange energy surrounding them. As they ventured deeper, they stumbled upon an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and vines. The light swirled above it, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. Mark approached the altar, heart racing. "This must be it," he whispered, glancing at Lily. "We need to disrupt whatever this is." He reached out, placing his hand on the cool stone, and instantly felt a surge of energy course through him. Memories flooded his mind, images of people, laughter, and warmth, intermixed with shadows of those who had disappeared. "Mark!" Lily shouted, her voice shaking. "What's happening?" "It's connected to everyone who has vanished," he gasped, struggling to hold on to his own consciousness. "We need to pull them back." Mark focused, imagining the townsfolk standing with him, their faces filled with joy and life. As he concentrated, the lights began to flicker erratically, as if reacting to his thoughts. "Come back," he shouted, pouring his heart into the plea. "You don't belong to the lights." A sudden wave of energy crashed over them, and the lights surged, filling the forest with a blinding brightness. Mark felt himself being pulled away, and for a moment, he feared he would be lost too. But then, he sensed warmth and presence surrounding him, a feeling of home. The lights dimmed, and one by one, the missing townsfolk began to materialize before him. They appeared dazed but alive, as if waking from a deep slumber. "Lily!" Mark called, and she rushed to his side. Together, they embraced their friends and family, tears of relief streaming down their faces. "What happened?" Tom asked, looking around, bewildered. "You were taken by the lights," Lily explained, her voice shaky. "But we brought you back." As they stepped away from the altar, the lights began to fade, retreating into the sky as if defeated. The forest felt different, lighter, freer, as if the burden of the lost had finally been lifted. The sun rose over Maplewood, casting a golden light across the town. People emerged from their homes, blinking against the brightness as they saw their neighbors, alive and well. The lights were gone, leaving only the memory of their eerie glow. The townsfolk rejoiced, hugging and laughing as the shadow of fear began to dissipate. In the weeks that followed, Maplewood began to heal. The community came together, planting flowers in memory of those who had been lost, promising never to forget the lessons learned. As for Mark and Lily, they became guardians of the town's history, ensuring that the story of the strange lights would be passed down through generations. They sat together on their porch, watching the stars twinkle above, feeling a sense of peace settle over them. Though the lights would never return, the bond forged through fear and loss remained strong, reminding them that even in darkness, they could find the light within themselves. Maplewood would thrive again, united against the shadows of the past. As the seasons changed, the townsfolk learned to embrace the beauty of life, the laughter of children filling the streets once more. They would tell tales of the strange lights to warn future generations, ensuring that their story remained alive, a reminder that courage, love, and community could conquer even the most haunting of nightmares. And on clear nights, when the sky was especially bright, they would look up, not in fear but in wonder, knowing that sometimes, the most beautiful lights come from within.